Hi, this is Stephanie Hansen, and you are listening to the Makers of Minnesota podcast, where we talk to cool people doing cool things in the state of Minnesota. And I have a Zoom call going today, like a lot of you spending time on your computer, staring into the void, looking hopefully at people that are fun to talk to. I'm really excited to talk to Fred Haberman. He's with Haberman and Associates. He's the CEO there. Also, he is the founder of a company called Freak Flag Foods. It's an organic food company. And Fred, I think I first found out about you guys maybe 3 years ago. Is that about how long that you've been around?
Yes, that is about how long Freak Flag has been around. We probably were experimenting a couple of years prior to that, but yes, it's been about 3 years, and it's flown.
When I talk about Freak Flag Foods, you've got some core branded products, but your genesis of creating those products is you are an expert in brand, wouldn't you say?
I don't know if I would ever say I'm an expert in anything, but I would say that I'm a passionate person about, around and for many things. So my wife and I started a marketing agency, I can't even believe it now, 26 years ago, which is called Haberman. Sounds like I'm talking in the third person. And our mission at Haberman is really to tell the stories of pioneers who are making a difference in the world. And a big passion area of ours revolves around advocating for good food companies. And we had the honor and the pleasure to work with Organic Valley, if people are familiar with that brand.
Sure.
For nearly 20 years. We started with them when they were about $40 or $35 million and worked with them until they were $1 billion co-op. And the chief marketing officer said, I hired Fred so he would stop stalking me because I had to tell their story. I just loved it so much. The multiple benefits that accrue when you buy their products, for the environment, for the health of people, and certainly for the family farmer. And then we started working with Annie's, homegrown Annie's, which worked with them for many years through their IPO, and then they were sold to General Mills. And many, many other brands that you would find at the co-ops, as well as Whole Foods. And then we started working a lot with food access organizations, whether it was the McKnight Foundation or organizations that we created ourselves, like Urban Organics, which was an aquaponics facility where we wanted to showcase a very sustainable model where you only use 2% of the water to grow both greens and sustainably grown fish in a what is coined a food desert, which is a controversial term, but nonetheless, I'll use it in this conversation, where people have very little access to nutritious food, and there are about 6,000 of those in the United States. And if you can believe it, we have 26 food deserts in the Twin Cities, this very wealthy area that is called the Twin Cities, where people have to get on buses and don't have easy access to transportation to get their nutrition. They oftentimes are going to gas stations and the like. So we wanted to locate the facility in a dilapidated building, which we did in the Hams building. And lo and behold, not just because of us, but because we were the first ones to go into this particular area in East St. Paul, we were able to generate a couple $100 million of economic development, which was really exciting for that area. And then Mississippi Market created another location in that area, as well as a number of other businesses. As I ramble in telling you about how I got excited about food, I think just food is, I'm very, very excited about the organic food movement. I prefer that we, and certainly my family, that we don't eat pesticides, and that, there are a lot of terrible things that come along with that for our health and for our land. And it's shocking today that still what's happened in the last 50, 60 years is that only 1% of our soil in the United States is organic. And what did your grandma call organic? She just called it food, because what we did since World War II is we really wanted to create this mass production system. And so over the last few decades, we've been trying to dismantle it, mostly for food security, ironically, because a system that is more, quite frankly, distributed is far safer and more localized, is far safer for all of us than certainly a mass production system. There, how's that for throwing everything at you right in the first 3 minutes?
I'm with you. Because it is sort of, we are seeing the Achilles heel of that system with COVID and with the pandemic and some of the racial inequities that we've experienced specifically here in the Twin Cities.
Yes.
And people are sort of going back to the farm, right? They're trying to order whole sides of beef, and they're ordering chickens from their farmers directly and buying eggs. And we've seen food companies and farmers markets and farms pop up as like pantries for urban people that are trying to get better quality food in a more sustainable way and in a way that they don't have to go into the grocery store with their mask on.
It harkens back to, and I used to know a lot more about this. You know, I went to Madison, so my memory at this age of 54 is a little spotty, but it's good to be alive. But anyway, there were these gardens, as probably many of your listeners recall, there were these gardens called Victory Gardens.
Sure.
Pre-World War II that in large measure were for food security. But an incredible amount of food and produce happened to be sold and distributed through these Victory Gardens. And I think it might even be 40 to 50% at that time. And of course, we dismantled that post World War II. And now we're, of course, to your point, going back to it. And once again, to your point, related to what's happened here, unfortunately, in Minneapolis, related to shining the spotlight on racial inequities. Of course, food deserts tend to follow the same thing we're seeing related to the with COVID-19 communities more heavily being impacted that are cultures or communities of color and the like. The same thing, of course, you can see with these food deserts. And so we need to begin and continue to make progress in these areas.
So with that said, you decided to launch Freak Flag Organics. What are your core products right now? Because you've got, I think, 4, unless you've expanded.
So, every business that we go into, I really believe in a mission. So the mission of Urban Organics is a very different mission, or was a very different mission than Freak Flag.
And Urban Organics was sold to Pentair.
And unfortunately, it is no longer with us.
Which is so sad because it was so cool.
I think the lesson there is be thoughtful about who you sell to.
Sure.
And it's not really a slam on larger entities. It's just that they're really not thinking more on. They're less entrepreneurial. They tend to be better at coming up and supporting more mature systems. But anyway, the mission of Freak Flag Organics is to inspire people to be themselves in the world and in the kitchen. And so I wanted to create a brand and a social advocacy brand that would inspire people to be themselves. And every day we have this opportunity in the kitchen to create something. And, every day when you do create something, hopefully, and you do something that's authentic to yourself and you follow your passion, you're a happier person. And when others see that, I believe they're inspired. And so our products today, we hope they're good by themselves, but hopefully they're inspiring people to experiment a little bit more. And so we started really with some products like our Chimi Verde sauce and our kale pesto, which actually the kale originally came from Urban Organics. We then moved into a number of other condiments, and then we expanded the pesto line to include a tomato pesto and a carrot pesto. And now we have expanded into bone broths, very tasty bone broths that include chicken tortilla, coconut chicken, which is more of a Thai soup, and then more of a lemon pepper bone broth. And we're very excited to share that Whole Foods nationally has picked up all of our bone broths starting actually last week. And we're about to be in a number of other retailers across the United States with our pestos. So
the bone broths called Freak Flag Organics bone broth?
It's called Freak Flag Organics. they're great because they taste wonderful on their own, but they can also be used as a great cooking sauce. So, you can make any number of dishes. If you're in a rush, you can, that was always the hope, that this idea of 1-2 free. Number one, obviously buy our products. And then number two, if you wanted to bake some chicken, just get some fresh chicken and you can baste them or do some type of fun Mexican dish. The same goes with our some of our condiments, like our curry mole. Once again, you can just add our sauce to a good protein or the like, and you can go with that. Kale pesto, of course, is great with noodles, but phenomenal with goat cheese. So it's always this idea of 1 + 2 = something hopefully special.
Who does your product development? Do you do it yourself in your kitchen, or?
So it's really the main engine for the formulations and the recipes is this wonderful woman named Mary Jane Miller, and who is a professional chef and is a wonderful person. And she comes up with the recipes, although it's always a collaborative effort. You just cannot do innovation, I think, without some help. It's kind of like a band, a music band, but she's the leader of the product innovation. And so, we're always looking at categories that we think could use a little innovation and freakiness, and the consumer might be interested in exploring new options. And then we go to her, and she immediately and amazingly comes up with wonderful recipes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is your broth shelf stable?
Yes.
Okay.
So all of our products are shelf stable. We started, interestingly, with products that we wanted to be all fresh, and then we realized with our condiments that they were also shelf stable. So we started moving into shelf stable, and that helped us a lot because, as many of your listeners know, we would like, I always love fresh products. We all make fresh products. Fresh products always taste the best. I'm not going to ever say that our products are going to be, maybe at times they're as good as fresh, but man, I go into my backyard and I pick some basil and I mix something up. It's pretty hard to compete with that.
Sure.
But when you're in the food business, it's really challenging to manage a fresh or frozen, particularly fresh supply chain. And so we went the shelf stable route. That doesn't mean that we might not go fresh in the future, but it would be a very, very different model.
And it's usually different buyers, and it's like,
oh yeah,
creating a whole new,
very different buyers. And boy, I've learned a lot, and boy, I've made a lot of mistakes over the last few years. Just the buyers are the kings and the queens of the food world, just as the distributors. And we have a really good relationship, in particular right now, with a few buyers that have really helped us with our innovation. They'll say, have you thought of this or have you thought of that? And they have 10 fingers on the pulse of what's happening. The amazing thing is that you usually only get 15 to 30 minutes with them. And so you've got to be very prepared and be ready to not just share with them what you're thinking, what you've created, but also how you can adapt to what they're looking for. And that's been a real eye opener for us. And it's for us, it's been about being able to, like a year ago, we didn't know we were going to be doing bone broths. We really didn't. It was the buyer that really turned us on. I always wanted to do a soup, and I was thinking, or a bone broth 2 to 3 years from now, but that expedited when one of the buyers said, hey, you should do this with this brand.
The hallmark of a lot of new food innovation and consumers finding new brands at the grocery store is sampling. I find it curious that you're going to be unveiling a new product in a landscape that is not being able to be sampled. Are you concerned about that, or how will you get people to try your product?
God, that's a great question. And we've felt that effect on the marketing side of our agency. It's this COVID has affected, so many different industries, and one industry it's really affected are all these folks that do shopper marketing, or specifically tastings and demos. And one organization that we work with believes that, and this was 6 months ago, that they wouldn't be doing any demos, obviously, this year, and no demos next year. And many of these retailers will, when you talk to the buyers, they will say, you have to, we require you to do X number of demos. And of course, that has drastically changed. Although there is talk that some of these larger retailers will be doing demos next year. I am, of course, concerned that we can't be doing the demos. At the same time, and this is the weird part, demos cost a lot of money. They can cost anywhere between, on the very low end, $60 some odd dollars, but they can cost $80 to $90 a pop for, and you're not living in those cities, so you have to outsource it. So on the one hand, you're saving a lot of money by not doing the demos. On the other hand, you're not getting into people's mouths. And so you have to then allocate those dollars, of course, to, depending upon what the brand is, and in our case, coupons or certainly TPRs, temporary price reductions, which I didn't really understand until a few years ago, and any other kind of creative marketing. I think what we're going to be trying to do is, the other piece that what is the most important advertising that you can do is on shelf. We have bright packaging. We're going to be doing some discounts. But yes, it concerns me that we can't be doing a lot of demos.
And I wonder how there's been a lot of talk about influencers and, the influencers are a joke and they don't really influence anything. And yet in the food space, they have made a huge splash in helping people to find products that they wouldn't have found. Me, what my aesthetic is, how I cook, what I like. And then I introduce you to these products that you would take a chance on because you have a sense of who I am as a cook or the kinds of things that I like.
Influencers. So our marketing mix is with most brands, so a lot of the companies that Haberman, the agency, will work with once again, they're generally privately held. They're when they grow up and are purchased by, say, General Mills, and they're not our client anymore. We're really good with the privately held, founder-driven organizations, but these tend to be mid-market organizations that are thinking about the next phase, possibly selling, and so they're going to spend more money on marketing. These smaller entities like Freak Flag, simply, let's say now we're in about 1,500 stores nationwide, which when you have a budget that has to basically all go to the trade, meaning discounts, coupons, you have very, 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 very little money to spend on marketing. So the best bang for your dollar outside of the TPRs that, by the way, the retailers are requiring that you have to pay money in many cases, you have to pay money for the
discount your product,
right? So on the other side, on the consumer side, what we call consumer marketing, where you have a nominal amount of money, which of course is the most important part, is your packaging, and I would say Amazon, if you can afford it, because Amazon is one of the best ways that you can market your product, is, to your point, which I'm getting to, which is influencers. So we will be spending a fair amount and most of our money that's left over on influencers. I mean, it's a no-brainer. To think that influencers don't have influence, particularly in this industry, is tomfoolery. And it's a wonderful thing that we have these. I particularly like people like you that are authentic, that are walking their talk, that have a good following of folks that have similar values, and they exist, of course, in these pockets, whether it's Southern California, Minneapolis, the Denver area, Austin area. It's really helpful for brands like ours that have not a ton of money to collaborate with those folks.
It's interesting, the markets you just mentioned, Austin, Seattle, Portland, the Twin Cities. Yeah. What I know from my advertising days, I guess, is that those markets have similar profiles. So if you can infiltrate those areas, that product can leach out and get into the Costco's of the world and help you expand. Would you say that's true?
No doubt about it. So, we time and time again, you're focusing on these 6 to 10 markets. Minneapolis would be one of those markets, fortunately. Minneapolis, Boulder, Denver, Seattle, Portland, of course, and then Austin, Boston. But then you get into some bigger markets that are really important, but are far more expensive: San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago, and Miami. But the first groupings are really important. The other piece that you learn pretty intensely is that people, the veterans will say, food is about distribution, like real estate, location. Well, it's not that simple, but let's just focus on distribution. When Whole Foods says yes, it's really a huge win, because not only do you get to be in Whole Foods, but many will argue that it's as important, or sometimes more important, that then you now have access to UNFI. And UNFI, of course, is that big distribution company. For those that don't know about UNFI, they're the largest organic natural channel distribution group. And I believe they purchased Super Value here locally, primarily not for their grocery stores, but for their distribution network. And that's so you'll see UNFI trucks around the Twin Cities. But what happens is that when you get into Whole Foods will open up 13 to 14 distribution centers that are managed by UNFI. And so when that happens, then you can go to these smaller retailers up and down the coast across the United States, the Kowalskis of the world, as an example, which are, quote, smaller retailers of, say, 10 to 15, 7 to 20 store chains, and say, hey, our bone broths are in the UNFI DC in Seattle. Kowalski's up there. In this case, it's Huckleberry's, which we just got into. Would you, these are the organic, natural, higher end people looking for quote, good food. You can get in there because they're not big enough to open up a DC on their own. So this opens that DC, which then allows you to kind of grow your business because you got into Whole Foods. And that's a huge learning that I had to learn.
Do you still feel like farmers markets? I mean, we're in such a weird place right now, and potentially we'll be here next year too.
Yeah.
Because you kind of started with some festivals and some events and some sampling. Do you still feel like that is a good way to get started?
I think it's the best way to get started. I'd like to say that you can. It's a test and learn business, and it's that way throughout the whole continuum. The first thing you go to your local church kitchen, which we did in Delano. That's where Mary Jane, Buffalo and Delano, that's where she lives. And we've got this organic garden out in Delano, and we would 4 or 5 years ago start playing around, testing and learning just in our own kitchen. And then we started testing, learning at Good Acre Kitchen, if people know Good Acre. And then right away, we were making our own product, right? And the good news there is you get to understand what is really going on here, with how difficult it is to get all the product there at the same time and all these different things, so that when the co-packers, when you eventually outsource it, which most likely you will, what to talk about. You understand pH levels. And then from there, to your point, you want to test it. So you go, what's the best place to test, and where are the most curious people, or people that are wanting to try new things. In our case, we went to the Mill City Farmers Market, and we love those people. We helped Haberman, help at the very beginning with the marketing of that. And it's a perfect place for us. and they'll give you the feedback. They'll say, "Oh, this is awful," or "This tastes good," or "Oh, blah blah blah." And then from there, you kind of go, which is the best next place. And I love, I'm a co-op rat. You go with Dale at Lake Winds, or you go with Josh Resnick and the group at Wedge and Linden Hills, and I've been members of theirs since I arrived in the Twin Cities 30 years, and they'll give you great feedback. And so you kind of, okay, the co-ops, we're kind of doing all right with this product. We're not doing that. Oh, maybe we should change the name. We screwed up on the name. Our packaging isn't, it's not, the product name isn't big enough, and you want to get that right. You want to learn, because when you get to the prime time, and not to whatever prime time means, because some people just want to be that small, and that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. For us, we decided to get investors, and so we have a different pressure model. But, if you want to get to the national level with Whole Foods, you better have some numbers. You better have some real understanding of what that takes. And then now you're going to be doing some serious production runs. And of course, that takes a lot more money.
Were you surprised how long it took to get going at your co-packer?
Yeah. I mean, everything.
It's like a year.
Well, it depends who the co-packers are. The good co-packers, like anyone who is respected and has credibility in the food business, they want to check all the boxes and dot all the I's and make darn sure that the food is safe. And and like with any business, the good businesses are busy. So unless something weird has just happened, so you're trying to get in with the co-packer that has a good business and is busy and has to make room for you. With that said, you want to do a lot of research. We have different co-packers now for different products, but I always want to have 2 to 3. During COVID, so that in case there's a plan B or plan C. And today supply chains are all messed up because of COVID, and co-packers, of course, are very, like anybody, very vulnerable to potential sickness. And so, what is your plan B? And where are you getting your? We had to get our packaging outside of the United States for this particular type of packaging. And it was very scary. Our business would have gone under potentially if we hadn't gotten the packaging. And then we had to figure out how we were going to get it to these certain DCs and distribution. And so, starting a food business, particularly a national food business, is really, really, really challenging. That's why I have respect for people up and down the continuum. I have a lot of respect for people that just want to have a small food business. One of my favorite food businesses that I've ever been to and I'm loyal to is Clancy's in Linden Hills. Kristen and I love Tracy over at Birchwood, and
sure,
Brenda
you're keeping some good company there, Fred. You're eating some good food if those are your go-tos.
Well, good food oftentimes costs a little more, but
yes, it does.
I want to support them,
and all those people. It's so, I don't even know what the word is. That is the feeling that I have when I think about these restaurant entrepreneurs and the amount they've had to shoulder during this COVID crisis. Like, it's not enough that everybody's business went, business changed and you're working from home and you're trying to do this and you're raising your kids. And then if you're a restaurateur, you were just closed for longer than anybody. Now, likely they may be the first place where there's COVID outbreaks because people tend to congregate there. I just feel so sad for some of these folks that have worked so hard to build these businesses, and through no fault of their own and through no amount of safety measures they can take, sometimes people get sick because you're dealing with, a lot of people moving in and out of a workplace. It's just sad.
It's really sad. I have a friend who owns a few restaurants, and like a few friends that own a few restaurants. And of course, they 2 of them lost 100% of their revenue, and
Mm-hmm.
one guy had to lay off or furlough 120 people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a nightmare.
And then you call them back, or half of them back, or 20% of them back, whatever the percentage is. And now in other parts of the country, they're having to close again. What do? Like, you have all this food, you've made plans, you're doing your business model, you're trying to stay afloat until we get through this virus scenario. And it's just going to change a lot. It's going to change our food system again.
There's no doubt about it. And, there are two sides of it, right? And I always want to try to look at the positive side, and it's really hard to find anything positive. And it's the only positive I can see is what you had mentioned earlier, is that I hope that it will continue to shine the light on the inequities that we need to do. We need to think about our food system differently.
And I think people will be cooking more at home and
like
thinking more about the cost of goods, like when you go to and you make something on your own and you know how much that costs. Well, when you go to the restaurant and you order something, you're maybe, going to place a higher value instead of on fast food, if you know what I'm saying.
We've saved a lot of money just by cooking at home, because we like to go to restaurants, but I love cooking, but it's just incredible how much money you save when you cook at home. And it tastes good. It's interesting. You go to restaurants, and like I said, I like going to restaurants, and I like the food, that I like the experiment. But, I always say, mine tastes better. Well, you know why mine tastes better? It's because I'm putting more garlic in. Or I'm putting those ingredients, I'm putting more of that fresh basil in. It's only because you're putting in the ingredients that you love.
Yeah, and also that you're controlling the quality. And
you're good. People say, well, you're a good cook. I go, no, I'm not. I just know where to get really good ingredients.
And then you let them shine. Well, it's been really fun to talk to you. When will we be able to find the bone broths in our Whole Foods?
So the bone broths are in the process of getting on all the shelves in the Whole Foods in the Twin Cities this week and next week.
Okay. Well, we will look for them. We're going to release this podcast next Wednesday. So that will be like July. What are we? We're about July 14th-ish. I don't have the calendar in front of me, but so people will look for it. And congratulations. It was really fun to talk to you today.
Great to talk with you. Love what you're doing.
Yeah. And I'm sure I'll hit you up for something here in the next year as we move forward. I know you're working with a lot of cool companies doing cool stuff. So
you're kind. All my best to you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Fred.
All right. Bye-bye.